Hey friends, and you're listening to Wondering Jews with Mijal and Noam. I'm Noam, and as you can tell, no Mijal. Weird, right? I'm probably disappointed. Well, hold your horses. She'll be on in just a minute, but let me back up and explain. A few years ago, on my other podcast, Unpacking Israeli History, I did an episode on the Entebbe raid of 1976. Maybe you know the story, but very briefly. Some terrorists hijacked an Air France flight that had stopped in Athens on its way from Tel Aviv to Paris, forcing the pilot to fly to Libya with a gun at his neck. From Libya, they ended up in Entebbe, Uganda. It was a horrible ordeal for all the civilians involved. Still, the end of the story is a triumph. The IDF's most elite unit flies under the radar to Uganda. It's an incredibly risky mission, but they succeed in saving nearly all of the hostages and bringing them back to Israel. 4 hostages are killed in the crossfire. One, who had been taken to a hospital before the raid, was murdered in revenge. And a commando named Yoni Netanyahu was killed too. One day, his little brother would become Israel's prime minister. And of course, every death is a tragedy. But overall, it was one of the greatest triumphs in Israeli history. And it happened on the 200th birthday of the United States of America, July 4th, 1976. I doubt most Israelis noticed or cared that it was the 4th of July. But for American Jews or Jewish Americans, the resonance went deep. At the end of that episode, I said something like, here, you know what, let's just play it for you. Call it a coincidence, call it divine providence, call it whatever you want. As a child of America whose soul is bound up with Israel and the Jewish people, I think there's something really special about this raid occurring not only on July 4th, America's Independence Day, in which we commemorate our formal break from Britain, that it was July 4th, 1976, exactly 200 years after the Declaration of Independence was adopted by the Continental Congress. Just like after the Six-Day War, American Jews were filled with pride after Israel successfully fulfilled their mission, with tragic but minimal losses. The story of the American Revolution is about American liberation, and the story of Israel is the story of Jewish liberation. This week we celebrate the United States of America's 248th birthday, the 48th anniversary of the Entebbe raid. And I have to say, this year, it hits different. All of it. The 4th of July, the Entebbe raid. Why? Because of the rise in global antisemitism. Because of the constant demonstrations against Zionists in America and elsewhere, which, by the way, I'm putting Zionist in air quotes. Being an American Jewish Zionist in 2024 feels more complicated than ever. And originally, Mijal and I thought we'd do our thing, have a conversation about it. Excavate, explore, ask each other questions, hear what the other's thinking about. But instead, actually, we decided that we wanted to do something slightly different. Instead of a conversation between me and Mijal, this will be Mijal's show. Because like me, she's a proud American Jewish Zionist. She is also, to make things even more complicated, an immigrant, and Argentinian, and Spanish, and Israeli, not to mention a brilliant thinker and wanderer. And she has so much to say about this strange, unprecedented moment we're all in. So in this episode, I'm handing the proverbial and literal mic over to Mijal, so we can all listen in and wonder together.
One of my earliest memories in America was in a public library. I was 12 years old, and my family had just moved here from Uruguay. I was born in Argentina, then spent some time in different countries. And when I was 12, we moved here from Uruguay. And my dad was trying to help me and my siblings feel more at home. So he wanted to take me to a public library. He knew that I loved books. I was known as a bookworm since I was a little kid. So he figured this would be a good way to get me acclimated. Now, I remember then that I couldn't read any of the books in the library, right? I couldn't read English yet. But I walked into this huge library and I looked around and I just recall thinking how beautiful it looked, how expansive, how many books were around me. I didn't grow up with libraries like this. And I was moved so much that I sat down on a couch and I took off my shoes. And my dad came to me and he asked me in Spanish, he said, Mijal, what are you doing? What are you taking off your shoes? And I answered him very, very earnestly with a lot of idealism. And I said, Papi, this is America. We can be free here. We can do whatever we want. And I want to take off my shoes. And that was one of my earliest memories. Now, looking back, I know that memory says, it's a little bit of a caricature about America, about freedom. Freedom is way more than, taking off your shoes whenever you want. But there was something there, something that reveals why America has been such a powerful magnet for so many millions of people around the world, historically and even now. What America represents so powerfully, it's that it's not just a country that was founded based on a group of people who were similar to each other or came from the same place or practiced the same religion. America was uniquely founded around a set of ideas. The founders of America believed that government needs to come from the people, and that every single individual has certain unalienable rights, such as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that should apply to everybody. That is part of what has made America so unique and so exceptional. Part of what I understood as an earnest, impressionable 12-year-old girl, that this was not just a country with great libraries, but a country that stood for something, and I wanted to be part of that story and to have access to those ideas that it stood for. Now, the fact that America was founded on a set of ideas, on a set of principles, on the one hand, it's what's made America so attractive and so resilient, is that it transcends so many things because it stands for ideals and for dreams that we have. But it is also part of what has made America also vulnerable, also fragile. It's that when you're supposed to represent certain ideas and ideals, you might actually have a gap between who you say you are and who you actually are. One of the most famous speeches given in commemoration of July 4th was a speech by freed, enslaved man Frederick Douglass. And he was a very well-known orator who traveled across the United States trying to fight for the abolition of slaves. And he was asked to give a speech about the 4th of July. The speech, which he gave in 1852, became incredibly famous. And it became known as a speech, "What to the Slave is the 4th of July." And if you read the speech carefully, what Douglass expresses in his words is what it means to live in a country in whose ideas you believe in so badly, you agree with, you look up to, and then see how that country falls so incredibly short of those ideals. In Frederick Douglass's case, see how men and women who risked everything for the sake of freedom and liberty and pretended to build a country on those values, literally themselves owned slaves, literally themselves built a country on the ideas of freedom and liberty on the backs of slaves. So Frederick Douglass gave an impassioned speech in which he both reaffirmed the ideas that America was supposed to represent, and as a patriot, I will call him a patriot here, as an American, stood up and said, I will call out my country, in which he both named the ideals and ideas that he believed in, and he also, as part of the American spirit, stood up to note the terrible ways in which America was falling short of those ideas. I want to ask my own question today on this 4th of July. I'm not facing any of the tremendous challenges and horrific hypocrisies that Frederick Douglass and so many others faced throughout American history. But I'm an American Jew. I'm a naturalized citizen. I love this country so much. And right now, there's something incredibly bittersweet and complicated and challenging going into this July 4th, both committed and in love with the ideas that America was supposed to stand for. And for the first time in my adult life, afraid that there might be a time in which Americans betray these values. I'm speaking right now, especially as an American Jew, just thinking about the tremendous rise of antisemitism that we've seen everywhere. Now, this antisemitism is not just the resurgence of Jew hatred that we've seen in so many countries and so many societies throughout Jewish history. There is something unique about seeing this kind of antisemitism and its rise in America. Because one of the ideas that America was founded on, one of the ideas that has made it so incredibly unique, is that every citizen should be treated equally regardless of their religion. Now, we might say this today and just take it for granted, but back then this was absolutely revolutionary. It was absolutely radical, and it gave birth to what historians called a sense of American Jewish exceptionalism. That Jews in America looked at America and said, there is something exceptional about this place, something that makes it stand apart from the rest of the countries in which we have been a minority. Part of what has made it exceptional is that in its foundational documents, in its creeds, from its beginning, Jews were welcomed, at least in principle, even if not always in what actually happened, but were welcomed to be part of this polity. In 1790, George Washington, the first American president, wrote a letter to the Hebrew congregation of Newport, Rhode Island, in response to a letter that they had sent him. And he offered up different reflections, different words of welcome of America as a country in which Jews who had been the ultimate other in Europe could actually find themselves at home. And he ends with beautiful prayer. May the children of the stock of Abraham who dwell in this land continue to merit and enjoy the goodwill of the other inhabitants, while everyone shall sit in safety under his own vine and fig tree, and there shall be none to make him afraid. American Jews throughout the generations, we have heard these words. We have held on to these words as the promise of what America could be. America as something absolutely exceptional in which we as a minority don't have to be othered, don't have to stand apart. Another famous words that we have kept in mind as the promise, the ideas of America that symbolize, represent American Jewish exceptionalism. I'll quote here verses by the famous Sephardic Jewish American poetess Emma Lazarus, who wrote the famous poem that stands even today in the Statue of Liberty. She wrote this in 1883. And just note that Emma Lazarus wasn't only a poet who wrote about America. She was a fierce advocate for Jews. She worked very hard to help save Jews back then in the Russian Empire who were facing tremendous persecution. And she fought to make America a safe place for them, for Jews escaping, seeing America as a country that could take them in. And of course, the words continue to resonate. Keep ancient lands, your storied pomp, cried she with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send this, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. Political scientist Kenneth Wald, who wrote a book in 2019 called American Jewish Liberalism, explained that part of the way that American Jews have understood themselves and the place in this country for so long is actually thinking of this country as unique in the way that it gave full inclusion to Jews in the national polity. In particular, Wald argued American Jews developed a deep commitment to the classical liberal value that the state had no religious identity and no authority to allocate benefits or costs based on religious affiliation. This American regime of religion and state was part of the reason that Jews saw in America a special place in which they could live freely and in which they wouldn't taste the same bitterness of persecution that their foreparents, especially in Europe, those who came from Europe, tasted. So what do we do now? As American Jews who love this country and the ideas that it stood for, the ideas not only of religious liberty, but of having a country in which citizens ideally don't treat each other differently because of our religion, because of our ethnicity, because of our race. What do we do this July 4th in 2024 when we have seen not only the worst pogrom against Jews in Israel occur on October 7th, but it precipitate an avalanche of hatred of Jews around the world and here in America. I love this country very much. The day I became a citizen, that I took an oath to be part of this country, was one of the most important days of my life. And now I walk around the streets of America. And part of what's really hard for me, and part of what's hard for so many of us, is looking at our fellow citizens in the subway, in the streets, in a supermarket. And for the first time, I'm not so sure how they think about me. And for the first time, I'm not sure that we are upholding the same ideas. So it's 4th of July. As an American, I want to ask this question. What does it mean to celebrate July 4th? What does it mean to stand up for American ideas based on the reality that we see around us? And even as I ask this question as an American, I want to answer it as a Jew. I've been thinking that there is something about how Jews have related to our other promised land, to Israel, throughout our history that can be really helpful for us, not just American Jews, but all American citizens who are nervous right now, who are wondering, could our country betray its own values? There's something deeply useful in the way that Jews throughout history have oriented ourselves towards Zion. If you look towards our earliest text, whether the Bible or the Talmud, we see their expressions that look at Zion, that look at the promised land, that look at Jerusalem, and that actually see it in two ways. We have the heavenly Jerusalem, Yerushalayim Shel Mala, which I would argue is the Jerusalem of ideas, the dreams that it stands for. And then we have Yerushalayim Shel Mata. We have the corporeal, earthly, complicated, messy, human Jerusalem with all of its issues. The real Israel, the place with all of its complications, in which you never actually accomplish the dream that you set out to have. And in many ways for Jews, there's always been a little bit of a frustration, right? Even after we go into the land of Israel, it's never perfect. We never achieved messianic dreams. But there's also been something amazingly powerful about it. It means that no matter how imperfect, how difficult, how bitter, how challenging, how corrupt the reality is, that we have always been able to hold on to the dream of what could be. The Jews living in Israel during its first kingdom, its second kingdom, during all of its different times, and seeing in front of them that it is not what it should be, have always been able to keep in mind what it could be, not only as a hope, but as something to strive for. It means that just when Jews were taken into exile time and again, that by the river of Babylon, Jews could remember Zion, and they could remember not only a place, but a set of ideas, a set of principles that could continue to orient their life no matter where they are. I think part of what's hard right now for us as Americans is when you have a great experiment that succeeded beyond the wildest dreams of its founders, that very often the inheritors of that experiment, of that project, forget the ideas, the ideals that experiment was founded on. We don't talk to each other about what America is supposed to be. We argue about politics, about policies, about our candidates, about the toxic nature of polarization and polarization that we are going through right now. We do not spend enough time talking to each other about not only the original ideas that America was founded on, equality before the law, religious freedom, checks and balances, the fact that anybody, no matter who they are, has the right to pursue happiness, the right to liberty, the right to life. We do not spend enough time not only talking about those original ideas, but asking ourselves, what are the new ideas that are going to breathe new lives right now to the great experiment that America continues to be? I'll be honest, I have no idea. None of us have any ideas what's going to happen with this great country that is America in the future. I often wonder about the Roman Empire. I know I'm not the only one. I wonder about the Roman Empire, which was so great. And I think most people living within it, at its center, could never imagine a world without it. And they could never imagine that you could have centuries of slow decadence. Think about all the civilizations that either fell down in one fell swoop or slowly degenerated. And we really don't know what America will be. But this is what we can decide. We could commit ourselves this 4th of July that no matter what, we will continue to be faithful and be loyal to the idea of America. That no matter what, we'll continue to fight for the promise, for the dreams that America is supposed to represent. Not only the old ones, but the new ones, the ones that have an even more expanded nature of equality and freedom than the one America started with. That is one thing that we can commit ourselves to as Americans and as Jews. You know, sometimes there are certain speeches or certain statements or certain words that we might feel that they're cliche or they might just be too idealistic or too earnest, right? That don't actually allow us to engage in this moment. But national holidays are times for earnestness. There are times for us to recommit ourselves to dreams, even if they feel like illusions or very far away right now. And so I want to end with the words of one of the greatest Americans, one of the greatest patriots who fought his entire life to bring America closer to its creed. The famous words by Martin Luther King Jr. in his speech, "I have a dream." I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold this truth to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by their content of their character. I have a dream today. Just reading of this, I keep thinking about my own dreams. My dream that my children, that all of our children will continue to find America, a country that offers them safety and prosperity, a country that offers them the opportunity to make it better, to consecrate their lives to its values and to the possibility of bringing it closer to what it's supposed to be. Happy 4th of July.
Wandering Jews is a production of Unpacked, a division of OpenDor Media. Subscribe to Wandering Jews wherever you're listening to this pod, and follow Unpacked at all the social media places. Just look for @JewishUnpacked. And most of all, be in touch. Write to us at wanderingjews@jewishunpacked.com. This episode was hosted by Mijal and Noam Weissman. Audio was edited by Rob Pera, and were produced by Rivki Stern.